coming off the heels of the WWE draft, there's something I really wanted to talk about. I know there's going to be no music in this video, but this is something I kind of wanted to do, and I had no time to really get music prepared. Following the WWE draft, they revealed that they'll be doing some trades before Backlash concludes, which I kind of understand, but I also don't see the point in, which we're going to be point in, because what's the point of drafting everyone if you're just going to start trading people? So today, I am going to be going through every single draft, not counting 2002 because there weren't really any bad selections, really. But I'm going to be going from 2004 all the way to now, or mostly up until now, because there are a lot of draft picks we're going to go over. And basically, I'm going to be telling you guys, I'm going to be going over all the bad and terrible, pointless draft picks that they've done throughout this entire draft period. So first things first, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there have been a lot of bad draft selections over the years. Even if they feel like, oh, these are actually really exciting and really good, but at the same time, these were draft picks that were actually done really well, but ultimately were rendered pointless, and that is why I'm going to be talking in this video. The pointless draft picks that could have ended up being really good, but they ended up becoming really, really pointless. So we're going to be kicking things off at the 2004 WWE Draft, and the biggest shock and surprise in this entire draft was Triple H, as he was the leader of Evolution, and he was drafted to SmackDown. This happened because John Cena came out and talked crap to both Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff, who were both general managers at the time. John Cena then put his hand in the ball and gave it to Paul Heyman, and Eric Bischoff told Paul Heyman that's his pick and he needs to make it. Paul Heyman insisted that this doesn't count because John Cena picked it for him, but it was then later revealed that it was Triple H who was drafted to SmackDown. However, good old Triple H was then traded immediately back to Raw prior to his re-debut on the SmackDown brand, rendering this whole draft and this whole selection pointless. Why was it pointless? Well, they did post trades afterwards. Basically, Kurt Angle became the new general manager of SmackDown because Paul Heyman ended up quitting WWE because he was drafted to Raw. Yes, he was drafted to Raw, yes. The only time in history that a general manager was actually drafted. But, Kurt Angle took over as GM, and he basically announced that he traded Triple H back to Monday Night Raw in exchange for Booker T, the Dudley Boys, Rico, and Jackie. Well, A-Train and Chuck Palumbo were also there, but I think the main three he said was Booker T and the Dudley Boys. Yeah. Imagine that. You have the biggest star on your roster, but you choose to trade him back to his other show? Now, I know some people are going to say, well, here's the thing. This was just done as a swerve. Like, if Triple H stayed on SmackDown, Randy Orton and Batista, they might not have done well on their own. They could have flopped. Like, they still needed more seasoning. They still needed more grooming. Some people may feel like if Triple H stayed, Randy and Batista wouldn't have been able to do well. How do you know this exactly? I think Batista and Randy Orton would have been fine. Like, maybe Randy Orton would have became the new leader. Randy Orton could have ended up becoming the new leader of Evolution. I think Evolution could have been just fine without Triple H. They said Evolution was about the future. Randy Orton and Batista could have, carried on with the future. And with Triple H gone, Randy Orton would have won the World Heavyweight title, and there would have been no need for them to turn him face. But all I'm saying is that this draft selection was really, really bad. It really was. It was not a good selection, and I think this one was a really pointless draft pick. It was a pointless pick, and it really did nothing. It really never really did anything. So, I'm going to be talking about this a lot in these draft selections, because I know some people may think this is kind of a not a good thing to really bring up, because they think, how will these count as pointless draft picks? But in the 2005 WWE draft, which I thought the draft was pretty good, there were decent names that they ended up drafting, but there were a lot of useless names, like Mark Jindrak, Rene Dupree, Danny Basham, and Kenzo Suzuki, and his manager. But according to the notes here, that the superstars that were drafted to Raw, they were released from their contracts prior to their debuts, and only Jindrak made one appearance. So all of these people, except for Chavo Guerrero, all the other names, like Mark Jindrak, Rene Dupree, Danny Basham, Kenzo Suzuki, and his wife Hiroko, never made a single appearance on Raw. So, rendering that entire draft selection completely and utter pointless. Why why even bother moving these people if you're just going to cut them from your roster? Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. The entire existence of the 2006 WWE draft is a sin in itself, as it only talked about ECW. Yeah, the entire existence of the 2006 draft, it was only ECW. And this draft was so pointless. Like, I know they were kickstarting ECW at the time, but they only had ECW in this. They only had Paul Heyman's ECW in all of this, and he only got 2 draft picks out of it. Only 2 people. He technically got the Big Show as well, but only 2 people. And that was Rob Van Dam and Kurt Angle. So this whole 2006 draft was pretty much useless, but also Kurt Angle ended up requesting his release at the time, so that really rendered that whole draft pick pointless, in my personal opinion anyway. So the entire existence of that draft was something I did not really end up liking. So the 2007 draft, there are a few things that I can talk about here, and I think one of them really has to do with Bobby Lashley. Now, in this draft, Bobby Lashley was drafted to Monday Night Raw. This was when they started doing the little computer randomizer. This was the first year they started it. This was the first year they started the whole superstars earn draft picks to get superstars. This was the first time they started doing that, where a computer would flash people on screen to earn them draft picks, getting the superstar that they would beat, getting the superstars from that opposing brand that they would defeat. So Monday Night Raw ended up getting Bobby Lashley in the WWE draft, and he was pick number 7. So according to the Wikipedia here, Candice Michelle was the person that got Bobby Lashley to Monday Night Raw. So Bobby Lashley at the time was the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, and prior to this, Jonathan Coachman, who was the Raw GM at the time, I couldn't stand Jonathan Coachman. I tell you, most of the Raw GMs, they always had the most insufferable ones. At least Adam Pearce is really good, at least. But regardless of that, so in the 2007 draft, Bobby Lashley was drafted to Raw from ECW because Candice Michelle defeated an ECW... Well, wait, that makes no sense. She defeated a SmackDown superstar named Crystal, but she got herself an ECW draft pick. How does that make any sense? Well, that's the first red flag. She beat a SmackDown person, so really she should have gotten someone from SmackDown, not from Raw, not from ECW. Not from ECW, but, you know, that's the first red flag I just immediately noticed right there. And secondly, Jonathan Coachman came out and stripped Bobby Lashley of his ECW championship because he's not on ECW anymore. Now, some of you may say, well, that actually makes sense. I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying that's the thing that's bad here. Yes, that does make sense. He's being stripped of a title that he has no rights to holding anymore. But as we go on here, over the years, as the years go on, there have been times, as we've seen over the years, we've seen the Raw and SmackDown Women's and Tag Team Champions switch to opposite shows, and they don't do this here. What they had to do with Jonathan Coachman here was actually pretty smart. But as the years went on, we've seen these pointless trades where the champions of the previous belts now have to swap championships and give them the other championship belts. It's pretty lame. It's really lame. Could have just said, hey, look, you're on the opposite show now, so you have to be stripped of this championship. If they were consistent and did what they did here with Bobby Lashley, with the Raw and SmackDown Women's and Tag Team Champions, I wouldn't have hated seeing the opposite people go to other shows, but because they always kept retconning everything and not making it accurate, was one of the baddest things about this. But the reason why I say Bobby Lashley is one of the bad draft picks was because, well, I believe he only made one appearance. I believe he only made, like, one appearance on Raw prior to this. And I think his match was against Mr. Kennedy? I can't remember. You people can remind me if you guys actually remember this of that episode of Raw. But I remember Bobby Lashley made his first appearance on Raw prior to the draft. He had one match on Raw. It was against Mr. Kennedy. And he got injured. And he got injured in that match. And then after that, he would get released. That is why I consider that a pretty pointless draft pick. That's why I consider it a pretty pointless draft pick. Because WWE have always tried to make Bobby Lashley a big deal. They've always tried making Bobby Lashley a big deal. But they always failed miserably at it. So let's talk about some of the other pointless drafts. This one is from the 2008 draft. And who remembers this? Who remembers this draft pick? Jim Ross to SmackDown in exchange for Michael Cole to Monday Night Raw. Who remembers this? Now, I consider this a pretty pointless pick, if you ask me, because why are we trading? Why are we drafting? Why are we drafting commentators now? I know they probably wanted to make it interesting, but I don't know about you, but I didn't like that. I thought that was pretty dumb, because at the time, JR was the voice of Monday Night Raw. And you could even tell, the crowd didn't like it either. The crowd didn't like it either, so I considered that a pretty useless pick. And other useless draft picks were basically superstars that never even got a chance to appear on their respective brand following the draft. So let's go through some of them. We have Trevor Murdoch, we have Big Daddy V, and we also had David Hart Smith, and also Chuck Palumbo. These people were drafted to different shows. They were supplement draft picks, And they never even appeared on the show that they were drafted to. Now again, some people may think it's not fair for me to mention people that got released, but I'm only including them because I feel like I'm only including them in this because I feel like, hey, you know, this is something I think we can talk about and make it interesting. And make it pretty interesting here. So, I'm going over the 2009 draft selections right now. I'm trying to see if there was any pointless picks in this one. Yes, there we go. Yes, there we go. We found one. Yes, there we go. We found one. It was Candice Michelle. She was drafted from Raw to SmackDown, never made a single appearance. Once again, David Hart Smith, once again, apparently never made an appearance on the brand that he was drafted to. So again, certain superstars just getting drafted to certain shows, and then they end up just never appearing because either they had no plans for them, or they just got released, which I think is kind of lame if you ask me. Whereas were people fans of Candice Michelle? I want to ask that question. Did people like her? I didn't mind her, but I didn't mind her. Anyway, so we got the 2010 draft now. Yes, this is actually going to come in real handy here when we get to... yes, this is actually going to come in real handy when we talk about some of the lies that WWE have made over the years when it comes to the WWE draft. Let's have a look-see. No, there was really no bad ones in 2010, so we can skip this one. This one was perfectly fine. There was no... But 2010 did have a really important thing happen that I want to bring up when we get to a certain point in this video. Yes. Alright, the infamous 2011 draft. Let's talk about this one, shall we? Now, this one right here is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this video. This particular year was one of the biggest reasons to why I wanted to make this particular video. This is the last time we ever had the WWE draft. We had one person who was released from their contract before they never appeared on the brand. That was Chris Masters. He went from Raw to SmackDown. But we have the infamous John Cena situation where SmackDown won a 20-man battle royal to win the first pick for SmackDown, and that person was none other than Fruity Pebbles himself, John Cena. Shocking the entire world as John Cena leaving Raw to go to SmackDown. And then later in the draft, in the main event, the Raw team of The Miz, CM Punk, Alberto Del Rio defeated John Cena, Christian, and Mark Henry from SmackDown to earn the final pick. And who was the final draft pick in the WWE draft? Well, it was none other than John Cena himself, as he was drafted back to Monday Night Raw. Why? Why did this have to happen? And I didn't like this back in 2011 either. This was so stupid. This was so stupid, and I never understood to this day, why did they do this? Some people may think, well, they did it because they didn't want Randy Orton and John Cena on the same show, and all that, but that's never been a problem when they're both on Raw. That's never been a problem when they're on Raw. Doesn't matter if they're on the same show. That's never been a problem, the two of them being on Raw. To me, they did this just to troll the fans. That's how I look at it. I look at this as nothing more than a troll move. They wanted to make people think that John Cena was going to be moving to a different show, but instead they wanted to troll the audience. Randy Orton ended up going to SmackDown as well, by the way. He ended up going to SmackDown in that draft as well. But all I'm saying is, it was such a pointless pointless move. It was such a pointless move, it did nothing. It was just done because they just... It was just so random and pointless, and they just did it to troll the entire fan base. That's how I look at it. And another draft selection that happened in the online draft was Alex Riley. Remember him? This guy was drafted to SmackDown, but according to the notes, he never made an appearance on this brand as he had not been given a SmackDown contract. So then he was moved back to Raw, because he was originally on Raw with The Miz. I don't see... That was really, really, really pointless. Like, I felt like he was another pointless draft selection as well. So, now we get to where the draft finally made its reintroduction, and this is another time where I can actually bring up something that happened a bit later on. So, there was really nothing about this draft that I didn't like. I thought this was a great draft. And then we move on to the Superstar Shakeup in 2017. Now the Superstar Shakeup was kind of the same thing. Now the Superstar Shakeup was kind of the same thing as the draft randomizer, where superstars would randomly show up on different shows. But if I'm being honest, I know I didn't like the Superstar Shakeup originally, but when I look at these now, I'm like, well, hey, this was sort of the same as the old drafts. But anyway, I haven't really found anything that was really pointless at the moment. I haven't really seen anything that was really pointless at the moment. So I'm just checking through everything just to see if I can find any discrepancies. So the Superstar Shakeup was pretty fine up until 2019. Up until 2019, this is where they kind of lost control of the Superstar Shakeup. So in this particular Superstar Shakeup, as we all know, relationships and real-life couples like to stay together. There was a situation in the 2019 Superstar Shakeup. They ended up, I think Charlotte was still on SmackDown at this time. I think she was probably still in a relationship. I think this is when she kind of started her relationship with Andrade, I think. Yeah, I think she was on SmackDown during this period because they separated, Andrade from... I can't remember sure what happened, but I remember, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I remember they moved Andrade and Zelina Vega to SmackDown, back to SmackDown. They were originally drafted to Raw, but they moved them back to SmackDown because Charlotte was on SmackDown, and I think she was in a relationship with Andrade. It's kind of when their relationship started, and I guess they weren't happy being separated, so they moved Andrade and Zelina, because they were still together at the time, as a on-screen, Zelina was the manager for Andrade. But then, because Zelina Vega was in a relationship with Aleister Black, she got separated from Aleister Black, so then they had to move Aleister Black to SmackDown, because to keep them together. And this is when the Superstar Shakeup really became a problem. This is when the Superstar Shakeup became a problem. That was when the Superstar Shakeup became a problem. So those ones were really, really pointless and really, really bad. And now we bring back the WWE draft that also took place in 2019, because they finally decided to stop the Superstar Shakeup nonsense and now decide, you know what, it's time for the WWE draft. Oh boy, I know I'm probably going to get a lot of yelling at this for this one, but this one doesn't make any sense to me. And this is where the first red flag comes in mind here when it comes to the 2019 WWE draft. This is when they started the 2-night WWE draft thing. So, in the 2019 WWE draft, we had a situation where Alexa Bliss was drafted to Monday Night Raw, also alongside Nikki Cross. They were separated draft picks. At the time, but they were separated draft picks, but at the same time, they both went to Raw. And then, this happens. Post-draft trades. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross were traded to SmackDown in an exchange for future draft pick considerations. What does that even mean exactly? This was something I could never figure out, even in 2019. Some people like to tell me, well, they were traded for the Iconics, you see. It's not that hard to understand. Well, to those people that say this, here are the Night 2 supplement draft picks, and according to these Night 2 supplement draft picks, the Iconics were listed as drafted from SmackDown to Raw. How can Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, who were on Raw, get traded for a team that were already on Raw? Because they were drafted there. They were drafted there. And Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross were already on Raw prior to the trade. So again, who were they traded for? Nobody. Because they never, and I mean never, said who they were traded for. They never revealed who they were traded for. Never. They never did. Never once they ever ended up saying who they were traded for. Never in any of the notes they ever said this person was traded for Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss. Even when I go through the entire lineup of people that were there, they never said who they were traded for. There are so many people that are still on the roster. But again, as I said, they never said who they were traded for. And this one bugs me to this very day. Why were they traded? Why were they traded to SmackDown? They were traded for nobody because they never revealed who they were traded for. Let's look at these post-draft selections again. Let's take another look at the 2019 WWE Draft post-draft selections here. And this one here, despite that this one also doesn't make sense, at least this one tells us who they were traded for. AJ Styles, who was on Monday Night Raw, was traded to SmackDown in exchange for Dolph Ziggler and Bobby Roode. At least they told us who they were traded for, so at least it makes sense. But why, oh why, would you trade AJ Styles? But through logic means, why would you trade AJ Styles, one of your best wrestlers, for a tag team? So you see again, this makes no sense. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross were traded for absolutely nobody. Never revealed. They were never revealed for anyone. You can't say it was the Iconics because they were already drafted to Raw before that happened. They were already on Raw prior to that trade happening. So in my personal opinion, Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss were just moved to SmackDown for nobody. They were traded for nobody. No notes, no nothing ever revealed who they were traded for. Never. They never ended up revealing who they were traded for. And that's the suckiest thing about it. They never revealed who they were traded for. And that's the thing I hate so much about the draft. That's the thing I hate. That's the thing I really hate about the draft. Because they never ended up revealing anything. They never ended up revealing who they were really traded for. So, yeah. So, the 2020 draft, pandemic draft, that had really, I couldn't find anything there. So now we get to the 2021 WWE draft, and oh boy, here we go, we got some people here. We got Hit Row, they were a useless draft pick. Who can never forget Shit Row? Shit Row. They were an absolute pointless draft pick. And the reason why they were absolutely pointless is because they didn't last long. Swerve was released pretty much within a couple of weeks, and then the rest of Hit Row were pretty much released a couple of weeks after. So, pretty pointless. Another pointless draft selection was Keith Bearcat Lee. Oh boy, poor old Keith Lee. Geez, who can remember this? Keith Lee was drafted to Raw with the gimmick of Keith Bearcat Lee, and I think Keith Lee had one match. I think he had like one match on Raw. I think he had like one match on Raw, and then I think he squashed Cedric Alexander. I think he killed Cedric Alexander in a squash match, and then after that he was released. This is what you call a pointless draft pick. That right there is the perfect example of a pointless draft pick. Like, I could go over several of the other pointless draft picks, like, you know, Aaliyah to SmackDown because they did nothing with Aaliyah. Splitting up Retribution. Like, I could talk about that. Like, I could, you know, like, I could talk about Xia Li. Boy, oh boy, what a pointless draft pick she was. Went from NXT to SmackDown, did absolutely nothing. Did absolutely nothing. I could talk about so many people that were drafted to certain shows and how they absolutely did nothing. So that was the 2021 WWE draft. We didn't have one in 2022, but then we get to 2023. So we're getting close to the end here. And this is kind of where I'm going to kind of slowly start transitioning into something else here. Oh yeah, here's a pointless draft pick. Oh, here we go. I've been looking forward to talking about this one. A pointless draft pick from NXT was Isla Dawn and Alba Fire. My God, was this a useless draft pick. Boy, oh boy, how these two just did absolutely nothing on SmackDown. And prior to this, and remember what I talked about before about champions being switched, and remember what I talked about before with Bobby Lashley? Why oh why did they not just strip Alba Fire and Isla Dawn of their tag team championships? Why did they not just strip them of their championships? It made no sense. Like I talked about before with Bobby Lashley, if you're going to a different show and your title's labeled something, wouldn't it be best to just strip them of that belt? But instead, Isla Dawn and Alba Fire was strolling around with a title that belonged on NXT, and they ended up losing them to Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler, and then they just never seem to appear since. Odyssey Jones, what a waste of a draft pick that guy is. But now let's talk about some of the lies that WWE made in these draft selections. One of the first lies they made was Carmelo Hayes in the 2024 draft. Now, I could talk about the 2024 draft, talk about how pointless that was, but I'm not going to. Carmelo Hayes was one of the first lies that they made in this draft. And why do I say it was a lie? Is because Wade Barrett said, and I quote, Carmelo Hayes is the first person from NXT to get drafted in the first round, which is completely not true at all. Finn Balor was the first person to ever be brought up from the main roster in the first round by NXT. Because remember, he was an NXT superstar at the time. Yeah. That's all I can really say there, and I don't like that. I thought that was I thought that was pretty much of a shitty lie for them to make. And another bad lie that they made, and again, this has nothing to do with Becky Lynch or Bianca Belair at all, but unfortunately, WWE again had to make up a false lie. Now, in this false lie, when Becky Lynch, I can't remember if she was on Raw at the time or she switched shows at the time. I can't remember what year it was. But I remember one year, Becky Lynch was drafted to Raw, I believe. I think and then they ended up announcing that she was the first female athlete to ever be drafted first. First ever female athlete to be drafted first as the first round draft pick. The first person picked out of all the females, she's the first one that has ever had that happen. And then they did the same thing with Bianca Belair this year in the 2004 draft, talking about how she made history by being one of the first women drafted. Well, I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you, WWE. I'm afraid I've got some bad news for you, WWE. In 2010, Team Lay Cool of Michelle McCool and Layla from SmackDown defeated Maurice and Eve Torres to earn themselves the first draft pick in the WWE draft in 2010, and the first female to be drafted in that draft was Kelly. So, yes, Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair made history. I ain't taking that credit away from them. But the credit that I don't like is that they discredit this particular draft pick as a non-and-void first-round pick. They made it sound like this never happened. Kelly, Becky Lynch, and Bianca Belair are the only women in WWE history to ever be drafted first. Kelly was the official first female athlete to ever be drafted to a show first. Go look at the draft lineup in 2010. She is listed as the #1 draft pick. Now you can say, well, 2010 they did the WWE draft randomizer. The later ones, it was just first round picks. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it was the draft randomizer or it was just them standing on a podium telling them who was the first round pick. Kelly was still the first person ever drafted. The first female ever drafted first. As the first overall draft pick, she was the first female to ever achieve this. So really, Kelly inspired Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair to do this exact thing. So yes, I hate that WWE had to make up a false lie to try and put over their narrative. And yeah, those are the things I really don't like about the WWE draft. Man, this was a long video. This was a really long video, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this entire video. Thank you all for watching, and if you guys did enjoy, hit that thumbs up. Let me know down below what do you think? What do you think are the most pointless draft selections in the WWE draft? You guys let me know what do you think was the most pointless thing about the WWE draft and their draft selections. Who do you think was the most pointless draft pick? But anyway guys, thank you all so much for joining me for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all on the other side.